From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined with our guest super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal Fagan. Most specifically, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is our weekly listener mail segment. We're going to hear from Dockerby. We're going to hear from, this is a true story, we're going to hear from a couple of cats. We're going to hear from some anonymous folks. We're going to hear from Metagent. We also, I think, wanted to collectively take a moment and thank everybody who has taken the time to listen to our episode about the dark side of adoption, and also to reach out and share some very personal stories. It really does mean the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to share one of those right at the top here. Something that I received from a person who's become a friend through the show, and I communicate with somewhat regularly on Instagram, asked to remain anonymous here, but this episode really struck a chord with them and compelled them to share this story. And I guess trigger warning up top, there's discussion of some sexual abuse, and it's just generally some pretty sad stuff, but it does have a happy ending. So why don't we pause here, make this our cold open, and then we'll come back with that story in full when we return. And we're back, and here is our message from an anonymous listener responding to our episode on the dark side of adoption. Listening to the adoption episode, and I was actually ward of the state, not really foster or adopted. And if I'm not mistaken, a ward of the state is something that's a little more common overseas. It's something that if you've ever seen The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, for example, or read those books, the character of Lisbeth Salander is a ward of the state due to not having parents, and also due to something that she did, a crime, I guess, that she committed that caused her to be monitored more specifically. But to this listener's point, you can also become a ward of the state, sort of in the way you might be put in a foster home here in the United States. I think it's just a little bit
legal
different.
Protection of some state body,
That's
some
exactly
arm
right.
of the government.
So I was actually ward of the state, not really foster or adopted. My mom lost 3 kids for good reason, and 2 of us were placed with relatives across the state. They had done fostering before, so we were never checked up on. I was raped 2 times by people associated with them, but I think I'm even more bothered by the fact that the yearly check-in we were supposed to have with a social worker was just a survey mailed to my uncle and filled out by him alone. I saw it once, and it asked about our happiness and how we were doing. Never once had anyone asked me those questions, so they were able to give themselves 5-star reviews. Had I ever got to privately meet with an adult outside the home, I would have had the opportunity to tell someone what happened before it happened again. Siblings went back to mom, but I got left behind, so I left on my own and hitchhiked across the country. On the positive side, life got better when I began being the only person responsible for taking care of myself. So I would end by saying that to any kids who are in that bad place now, that it does get better, and that they should find the bravery to talk to someone if they feel like things aren't right. They might not realize right away that what they are going through isn't okay, but they can't blame themselves for not recognizing abuse as abuse when they never got to know love. Can share any of that if you want, or if it's relevant in the future, no name if you do. Feel weird sharing it, but it is a relief saying it instead of just saying, quote unquote, bad things. I wrote an autobiography even and just labeled the worst as bad things, because if I don't call it what it was, then I can pretend it didn't happen. But 17 years is a long time to keep that in. Thank you guys for covering the dark side of adoption, and I hope others find the comfort I did in hearing a lot of us were luckier than we knew. I think you can probably hear it's a little emotional reading this. I can't thank our listener enough for sharing this very private thing. It would seem for maybe the first time in a public forum like this. And I know that has to be complicated, but it would seem empowering. And that makes me very happy that you felt comfortable enough to do that and to allow us to tell this story and hopefully, reach folks that maybe are, in the thick of the situation that you found yourself in. Because we know that even here in the States, these kind of situations often fall through the cracks and, people are even killed, children. It's a horrible thing. We know the system isn't inherently vicious. It does not intend for these things to happen, but it is understaffed, and often there are opportunistic elements that can come in, like in this situation, and take advantage of the system for a check and not do that sacred duty that is, looking after a child who is in need. So I just, I can't thank you enough. And guys, we got other messages similar to this, but this is just one that I thought was really moving. And I just wanted to share it. But can you imagine the idea of being able to self-assess that's just mind-boggling. And if unfortunately, I can imagine it, but how awful and inefficient that a human never even got to speak to these kids.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Pretty recently, my son's in a public school, and he got something sent home by the staff, like the teachers, the classes that he's in, and it let me know as dad and his mom that there's going to be an assessment, a self-assessment, basically, that every kid was going to fill out in the school. And it was going to ask questions like this, and, about how you feel, if you feel safe, if you feel fulfilled, all these pretty big concepts for children of an elementary school age. But that kind of thing being, asked of a child in that moment when they're in school, which is theoretically a safer space for some of the kids than it is at home, right? If they're in a bad situation, that to me is a massively important thing to exist. And it makes me very sad that this person that is writing to us didn't even have that opportunity in some, third party group to come in, and an adult that's not a part of that family that's taking part in the bad stuff to come in and actually just ask the question, hey, how you doing, to the kid.
It's just such a conflict of interest. That alone is maddening. But just when you find out that this is the kind of stuff that it can actually help to cover up a policy like that.
Yeah, I'd like to begin by Anonymous thanking you specifically for trusting us enough with this story. This is, as we had mentioned earlier, this is something that many people have their own experiences with. We're very sensitive to that. One thing that I would like to say is you have, by virtue of contacting us, you have already done an impossible to estimate level of good for fellow conspiracy realists who may be in similar situations and have felt at some point in their lives alone. And there's a power in that. And we thank you for this. Also, if you are comfortable, please do feel free to send your autobiography along. I would love to read it, and just grateful for your time, as well as the time of everybody else who wrote in. This does matter, and it is incredibly important. So thank you.
Yeah, I think you'll hear emotion in all of our voices. This is just something that, having been children ourselves, and some of us, of course, having children, and all of us, having children in our lives, just the idea of being in such a place of vulnerability and utterly having this system fail you, in just the most egregious kind of way possible. It's just difficult not to feel emotional about this stuff. But I don't know, guys, are there any, if there were kids out there that were experiencing this stuff and they had the courage or the wherewithal to reach out, would this be the kind of thing you would just report this stuff to the police?
Maybe.
It's tough. Theoretically, yes. There are things, what are they called? Mandated reporters who are legally required,
Check
people
in.
teachers, educators in
That
particular.
might be better. Tell a
We're-
teacher.
We're big fans of education and teachers here, dramatically, cartoonishly underpaid, go every day to spend their heart, their blood, their sweat, their tears, and spoiler, here in America, a lot of money out of their own pocket. And these are not very deep pockets. Those are people worth trusting. So I would say mandated reporters are a big part of the conversation.
But to the point of our listener, there could be some kids that are in the situation that don't even recognize abuse as abuse. And how do you reconcile that?
Because things can become so evilly, insidiously normalized. That's part of it too. I mean, cliches are only cliches for a reason. When people say things like it takes a village to raise a child, there is a truth to that, in that everybody in that child's environment is in some way, I would say, or I would think, maybe I'm idealistic here, I would say you are in some way responsible for ensuring the safety and the opportunity of that child as they grow and learn. Like I used to be a jerk about it. Like I would sit somewhere and there would be a kid that all of a sudden I'm the only adult, in the area. And I used to think, oh, crap, now this kid is my responsibility. I hope nothing terrible happens for the next 6 minutes or whatever. And I'm not paid to be the babysitter here, but there is a nobility to it. There is a mission. And again, not to sound like a broken record, nor a cliche, but it is important. You're not alone. And there is great power in reaching out to a community.
Yeah. I it's hard for me to imagine a kid that's in this situation actually hearing this and then being able to take action based on it. But maybe I'm underestimating all of this thing that we're doing right now. But I've always heard that writing a simple note, like even with just the words, please help or something scribbled on a tiny little piece of paper, a gum wrapper, something like that, and just handing it to a stranger, right? Yeah, we've seen instances of that working out, where somebody gets pulled out of a situation because they slipped a simple note to somebody at a grocery store when they were when the uncle or whoever it is taking you out to shopping because they don't have time to do whatever. I do believe in the goodness of people as you're describing there, Ben. People who aren't necessarily responsible for that kid at all in any of the filial ways that we discussed in our adoption episode, but will recognize when they can be of help.
100%. Yeah, I don't really have a whole heck of a lot to add that hasn't been said. So I would just end by once again thanking our anonymous listener for sharing the story. And again, to everyone else out there who have shared their stories. Let's take a break and hear a word from our sponsor and then come back with some more messages from you.
And we've returned, and we are jumping to the phone lines to hear from somebody that, guys, I think I just am not hearing this person correctly. Maybe you can suss out what this person's nickname actually is. I've been calling them Meta Agent, META agent. I think they are saying Metasys agent. That's
Are you
what
sure
it
it's
sounds
not
like to me.
Metagent? They have
has
the
all
water.
the Metagents.
It has the Metagents.
It might be, but they called before we put that out, so I don't know.
What is time?
So I'm going to call this person Meta Agent. So here is the message Meta Agent has for us.
Hey guys, this is the Metasys agent. This article that's a big concern for everybody. The issue with city fertilizer, or it's sometimes called black sludge. There's been a couple of farmers that are refusing to sell products and like even their cows because they're finding it so heavily contaminated with PFAs that it's contaminating a lot of farmlands. And it's supposedly from the articles that I read, a worldwide problem. Yeah, thanks for the show and wanted to give you guys a pretty interesting topic to go through. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so that is the Metasys agent. Well, we'll just say it like that. I'm sorry. I think maybe I just misunderstood. And I kept replaying it and I Couldn't get what it is. But I like Metagent, though. You should just call yourself that again when you call in. That's cool. Metagent. You guys, city fertilizer, black sludge. You ever heard of this?
Yes, but I'm like a terrible sample size for this question.
Okay. Noel, you ever heard of city fertilizer?
I have not. And I've heard of black sludge, but not in this context.
Well, have you heard of black gold?
Hey, Texas tea?
In this case, no. It's used...
Texas turds?
Exactly. It's used poo-poo that human beings in cities, send down the toilets and then into the sewage system and then into the sewage treatment plants. And then as it's being treated, the solids that come out of there are black gold, a.k.a. black sludge, a.k.a. city fertilizer. It's the human poo-poo. Okay, so sorry. So why is this important? Why is this scary? Why is this weird? Let's jump to an article from April 10th, 2013. It is posted on npr.org's website. I believe it is part of an episode of All Things Considered. It's written by Frank Morris. I want to read just a little bit of this because this is really, I think, one of our major first introductions to the concept of city fertilizer. So here we go. The title is Cities Turn Sewage into Black Gold for Local Farms. Let's just read it verbatim here. Thank you, Frank Morris. On a normal day, Kansas City, Missouri processes more than 70 million gallons of raw sewage. This sewage used to be a nuisance. But Kansas City and a bunch of other cities around the world are now turning it into a resource for farmers. Farmers who need fertilizer. Yep. So that's really all you need to know. Frank calls it the smelly stuff because it does, apparently, according to people who produce this and according to the EPA, it has a smell. It's not quite the poo-poo smell that maybe you might be imagining, but there is a bit of that sulfurous thing going on to it. If you've ever smelled the sewer, walking by, we live in the city.
Oh, yeah,
smell the sewer.
For sure. Catch a little whiff and then it sort of like vanishes, But
yeah. But now imagine covering acres and acres, maybe even hectares. I don't know the difference, to be honest, of farmland in this same poo-poo. Kind of gross. Now let's go back, guys. So let's just take that concept, right? It was going to be great because cities were going to be able to get rid of this stuff and make use of it. It's going to be a great use. It's going to make food now. Holy mackerel. Talk about recycling, right? Those carrots go in, then they go out of you, and then they make more carrots. Beautiful. Well, we talked about things like prions. We talked about things like problems with using poop and parts of one animal to feed that same type of animal. In this case, humans, we're the animal. There could be huge problems with it, right? But that's not the problem here, guys. The problem is something we mention all the time on this show. Ben, can you do the honors?
Well, if I had to guess, and first off, thank you, Metagent. Check out some of our work for IGU. It's for you, bud. If I had to guess, Matt, I would say we might be talking about some metals that are heavier, but more importantly, we might be talking about some PFAS.
Yes, old
PFAS.
some carbon chains that are pesky and really helpful, but also stick around and end up getting in the water. And in this case, in the soil / fertilizer / the food that we're going to end up eating. It's not good at all. You can go to the Columbia Missourian. They have a website, columbiamissourian.com, and you can find an article that was written June 5th, 2024. It is titled, City Finds Forever Chemicals in Fertilizer Sludge Continues to Apply to Crops. Sorry, that's comical to me. They find a big problem, but they got to keep using it because now a lot of the farmland around this area is dependent on this supply of fertilizer. Because if you don't get the nutrients into that soil, you can't grow any of the crops. And thankfully, that's the reason why it was called black gold, is because this stuff, this recycled doo-doo, it has a ton of nutrients in it, and it's nutrients that plants need. It's got the Metagent spin.
It has the Metagents.
It does.
All the Metagents.
That's for you, Meta Agent.
Exactly.
We wrote that for you before
We didn't know
before you called. But yeah, Matt, you're describing maybe also what we in the Boffin world in the Ivory Towers would call path dependency, meaning that a certain technique or technology or process has become baked in, just like fresh baked poop. And then the other ancillary or subsequent industries rely upon this. So for instance, to stay with the idea of energy, loosely put energy, you could talk about path dependency as an example of coal during the Industrial Revolution. Well, after people knew it wasn't 10-10 double plus good, they had to continue using it simply because so many other industries depended upon its existence. And maybe that's what we're looking at with this sludge. But one question I have for you, Matt, and for you, Metagent, is by the time people found out about the inclusion of PFAS and the inclusion of heavy metals, it feels like maybe the horse already left the barn. Was there some sweet spot where human poop was just amazing for agriculture?
Well, it is. And here's the problem. I think it's the nature of the process of recycling the sewage water. And it's not in the poop necessarily, although there are PFAS in us all the time. Usually when they get into us, our body doesn't process them. So they just stick around and go into places like our testicles and our brain. Sorry, just pointing out other times we've mentioned the places that they end up on this show.
It's all true.
Our favorite places, our balls and our brains.
Same thing. So, but Ben, I want to stick with that too, because there are major problems. It is unknown right now, at least from the writing I've seen, where the PFAS is originating. Is it coming just from the water system itself, from the waste? Is it coming from some other place when it's like one of the processes that are used to create this stuff? So we're going to go to the EPA's website right now to learn a little bit more about this black sludge. They refer to it as biosolids. And I'm going to read verbatim from their article, Basic Information about Biosolids. Here we go. Biosolids are a product of the wastewater treatment process. During wastewater treatment, the liquids are separated from the solids. The solids are then treated physically and chemically to produce a semi-solid, nutrient-rich product known as biosolids. The term biosolids and sewage sludge are often used interchangeably. There are tons of regulations that the EPA has set forth, like standards that this reused poop has to meet before it can be applied to, food that humans and animals will be ingesting. You can read all about that right now. There's Class A and Class B treated poop. I'm sorry that I'm saying it like that. Guys, I feel like such a child.
Forever young, Matt.
Ben, I was cracking up when you were talking because you used the term loosely, and I couldn't get loose poops out of my head.
Well, just get them out of your butt first. You know what I mean? Order of operations. Yeah.
Loose poops sink sloops.
There you go. But hey,
Sun Tzu even.
Don't fire until you see the
whites of their buttholes.
Buttholes. Yeah. And that's also technically the correct pronunciation is sun poop. All right,
there we go.
Sorry. That's a way to, I guess what Noel and I are doing here is backing you up. Don't feel like there's anything wrong with having a hearty laugh.
Solidarity and childishness.
Yeah. So let's get back to this large scale bowel movement.
Yes, let's do that. So there's an article you can find in The Guardian. This is from March 12th of this year, 2024, written by Tom Perkins. The title is Legal Action Could End Use of Toxic Sewage Sludge on U.S. Crops as Fertilizer. Sewage sludge. I really flubbed the sludge there, guys. This is all about an intent to sue that was put forward by a group of people saying that regulators in the United States failed to see the dangers and to protect consumers, people who eat foods that are grown out of this toxic sewage sludge. That's how it's being described here, as well as
which you would never know. You would never know, by the way, because there is no FDA requirement to put that on, a label for a product, right?
Oh, I didn't even know that. Is that true? You don't even have to label this stuff as from human, sewage?
Not to interrupt, but I don't think so. I've never been in a situation where someone says, it's 99 cents for an ear of this corn, but it's 69 cents for this. And then you go, why? And they go, well, it's because of the poop.
Okay, you're talking about the end product. In my head, I was thinking about the bulk fertilizer being purchased. Like, it didn't have to have a label. That makes way more sense, Ben. Yeah, it doesn't say grown in human poop. I've never seen an ear of corn that said that. Oh, gosh. There was another thing here I was supposed to mention about the most common foods that are grown in this stuff, but I think it's soybeans and corn mostly. So like the huge bulk amounts of those staples are grown with this stuff because this fertilizer is significantly cheaper than other alternatives. The more expensive stuff that is kind of in short supply, non-human poop fertilizer. And we talked about the phosphorus. What is it? What was it, like peak phosphorus or something we did a whole episode on?
Yes.
And how that's an issue for fertilizer specifically and for food growth. This is a whole wrapped up thing, you guys, that might be worth our time. I just hate to go back to the PFAS well. It's awful. It's gross stuff. We end up having to explain how horrible these substances are for us every episode we talk about it. And it makes me, it's a huge downer. Right now, I feel down because this stuff is literally in everything, and now it's in the dang fertilizer.
I think it's definitely changed the way that our crew considers diet and health, for sure. There are a couple things we all had to say goodbye to separately, and that's just a bummer.
And then forget that it's even in there. Why did I stop eating that? Who cares? It's in everything anyway.
I miss orange soda and microwave popcorn and all that slow jazz.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Some of those things I've gotten rid of, but I'm still chugging an energy drink right now and eating all kinds of unhealthy things, I'm sure. Well, hey, thank you, Metagent, for letting us know about this. If you hear more, write to us, send us a voicemail, anything like that, especially specifics, or if any action is taken. Otherwise, we'll continue looking into this story. We'll be right back after a couple messages from our sponsors.
And we have returned, as always, thanks to our fellow conspiracy realists who have spent some time here with us. Time is the only real currency that living organisms have. So we understand it, we appreciate it. And I seldom ever do this, but you guys, can I tell you just some personal stuff real quick?
Whoa.
Yeah, just between us and the NSA and the millions of people tuning in right now, or AI, it's been a very difficult time here for our crew, folks, for all of us. And it seems that when you read the news, there's a disaster every 4 hours, and it's easy for us to read about these things a world away and not feel personally hit, like when we're talking about this adoption episode, it really hit home for me as well. And I'm still with Anonymous, and I'm still with, the work we did and the people we've spoken with about this, because I have people in my family who have been, like you were mentioning, Noel, who have been directly impacted by these things. So I just wanted to take a personal note before we go into some fun stuff, to thank all of our fellow listeners. There's a reason we call you fellow listeners. It's because you were a big part of this show. And just thank you to everybody who has taken the time to reach out, because the folks here on the other side of your earbuds or your AirPods or your headphones, I think those are three main your speakers. Oh, yeah. Okay. The folks on the other side are, more than just voices in your head, the real people too. So every time you take a personal moment, it just absolutely means the world to us. Dylan, Tennessee Pal, play me off of my pretentious little soapbox there, but hopefully the sincerity carries through. Now we're going to go to a excellent letter. We got one of many from several people who are in the trenches of education. And when we talked about, you'll recall earlier, we explored a bit of a pilot program at David Gain College over in the United Kingdom, where they said, we are going to sub out human teachers with AI programs. And they enumerated the advantages of these programs. And then a lot of people, including some of our fellow listeners, told us their concerns. Before we get into, we'll just do this one letter before we get into it. Has that stayed with you guys, the AI teacher thing?
It has. It's come up in conversation quite a few times with folks I know who heard the story outside of the podcast and just kind of brought it up already, because I think it is a hot button issue, even for folks who don't have teachers in their families. But it just, first and foremost, just seems like a terrible idea. And I also did a little more digging, and maybe we talked about this in the episode, but it's not like it's cheap. It's tens of thousands of pounds a year for the privilege at this particular private school in the UK.
And it's also energy intensive to have AI in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Guys, I forgot to even tell you this. We talked about that last Wednesday as we record this. Then on that Saturday, I took my son to one of his schoolmates' birthday parties, and I met one of the moms of one of the kids who happened to be a Spanish teacher at that high school.
That magnet school?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she showed me, she pulled up, she happened to be doing work, because guess what? When you're a teacher, you're doing work when you're at a kid's birthday party, because it never stops. She was grading papers, and she pulled up on her laptop these diagrams that it's going to be really hard for me to describe to you guys right now, but it's diagrams that show basically how the skills that a child going to that high school will be learning when they take a Spanish class. And it's not the way you would think about it maybe when we were in high school. They're not thinking about it as language arts and all this other stuff. They're breaking it down into these modes of thinking, basically. And how is this class affecting these different modes of thinking for you? It was really cool, actually. And she explained that it had a lot less to do with utilizing AI and more in learning to think about how this stuff is going to change everything that we do and everything we learn, and how even jobs are going to function in the future.
Metacognition, thinking about thought. Yeah. And with that, these are excellent points. With that, let's go to Dockerby. Dockerby, to the point about being an educator, is definitely probably underpaid and working too much. That's just a guess. We have not spoken to Dockerby directly yet, but Dockerby, your letter meant the world to us, as well as the letters of the many other educators who have contacted us about this story. Here it goes. Hi, guys. I've been enjoying your show for the past year or so. You can call me Dockerby if you decide to mention this note in your show. I believe most educators will tell you that an AI teacher is a terrible idea. Points for you, Noel. Not because we worry about our jobs, but because we care about children. We know from the failure that was the COVID lockdown, the negative impact virtual learning had. I studied cyber school for my doctoral dissertation. Congratulations, Dockerby. And from what I read and what I observed, most students, with few exceptions, do not learn on screens. We all learn differently, so classrooms have a variety of activities so that all learners can be engaged. An alarming number of students admit that they put almost no effort into online learning, and there are multiple cheat websites like brainly.com, not a sponsored ad, where they can go to find the answers to pretty much any online educational activity. Now, let's pause there. because I think we've all seen this with, people in the audience who have kids or are educators, or if you have educators in your family, you've seen that especially during COVID, you've seen that shift to this online classroom, which is pretty easy to game. Is that a hot take?
No, I don't think so. I didn't have experience with this, you guys, but I'm just looking at Brainly's website, and it's described as like a tutor, right? An AI helper with your homework.
And that aspect of it doesn't seem completely shockingly awful to me. I think even in the news segment, I'd mentioned like the idea of using AI as a helper for teachers, as a supplementary tool. But, having that be the whole thing just seems really ill-advised. But sorry, Matt, please carry on.
Oh, no, I'm just pointing, I'm looking at the website right now, and it's got a lot of people saying about how much they love it and it helps out. But it appears that you could literally write in or take a picture of or scan or whatever you got to do to get, let's say, a pretty complicated math equation into the system, and then it'll just spit out the answer for you.
And perhaps the big thing a lot of educational institutions, and to be honest, a lot of adult institutions are working with is the fundamental importance of transparency. When people are using these tools, right, and they're not telling their teacher, they're using these tools and they're not being upfront and public about it, it becomes incredibly ethically fraudulent. It reminds me of our earlier conversation with our pal John Walzak from Missing in Arizona, who uses AI tools to replicate the voice of a guy named Robert Fisher. And from the jump is very honest that this is what's happening. This is a technology we are leveraging. So it reminds me also, as we continue, it reminds me of one of my friends who was an educator at a local school, what you would call an in-need school. And this poor guy's I asked him about ChatGPT, right? And the importance of transparency there. Like, don't use it and pretend that you're not. And he said, yeah, man, I'm not going to do his voice. Keep that part in, Dylan. But he said, yeah, man, I've had these essays from these kids. I know they're really smart, but a couple of times I've had to say, I give you a 0 and I give ChatGPT 4 a 100. And I don't know if that's the right take. I don't know if that's the right tact. We are not ourselves educators, but to your point, Matt, this feels increasingly mission critical. Transparency, arming people with information. What else could you want with kids, right?
Yeah. Well, you want transparency back, which is why it's so important to, give it to them.
Yeah. Like if a teacher is leveraging this sort of stuff, we can only assume that if they are a good faith actor, they're also explaining, their means and methods, and they're not going to try to obscure, to be a professor at this point,
Well, I'm watching it happen in real time with my son when I, sit down with him with his homework and stuff. And there are concepts like basic mathematics concepts, strategies, maybe let's say, that I've never encountered before.
Oh yeah, like the thing where you count the dots on
you're right, but there's stuff in there in ways he gets to an answer like that, and I go, how did you do that? I couldn't do that in my head, and honestly, it's because I had a calculator. I had a calculator for most of the stuff when I was at least older and really thinking about some of these higher order things. And he's only doing, pretty basic division and multiplication right now.
But also shout out Texas Instruments. Those guys are, how are they still the top dog of school calculators?
And they're not just in calculators, man. Texas Instruments is a fascinating company.
Oh, yeah. If you guys have ever seen the show *Halt and Catch Fire* that talks about Texas being the Silicon Prairie, they were very much neck and neck with Northern California in terms of that kind of space race for the personal computer. It's a really interesting show that has a lot of truth to it. It's historical fiction, but highly recommend that. And I didn't know much about Texas Instruments in those terms, but they really did have a huge impact.
Great call. Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Also, just to point it out, instruments is a very vague umbrella term. You know what I mean? We're
It's a
in
tool.
Texas. What do you make? Instruments? This interview is
Destruction.
over. So
Varying sizes and applications.
yes, there it is. Really weird disruptors, whatever. So Dockerby continues and says, there is also the issue of the socialization that is missing in most cyber environments. One of the most important things that young people learn throughout their kindergarten to 12 experience is how to be humans and how to interact with other humans. A large percentage of the young people who are learning at home during the lockdown never recovered to where they should be emotionally. Many of this year's college freshmen are still emotionally where they should have been around the 9th and 10th grade, and they are not prepared for the college environment. I don't know. Do we have any notes on that one? Because I've seen it. I have some kids that are in like my friend and family circle who are pandemic babies, and all their friends were adults for a couple of years. That's a real kick in the pants.
It's not a one-to-one, but the only thing I compare it to in my mind is that I'm a 9/11 kid like that. So 9/11 happened right towards the end of high school for me, and it shaped me a lot.
Same. How could it not? Yeah.
Well, because so many other things and concepts got introduced right at that time, right? And ways of thinking about the world and other people, and it really just put a lens over the front of my viewing device. I don't know what I'm saying, but
worth it.
But I feel like that has occurred for these kids, right? All that stuff they went through, thinking about the vulnerability that exists just in this whole system that we run and we call civilization. I don't know. And conceptually, their minds probably can't even fully wrap around some of that stuff. So it's almost like, I don't know. It's a state of unease that doesn't have a full explanation yet.
Yeah. And without sounding hyperbolic, the real cages are often not the cages you can see. They're the starting assumptions, right? The framework, as you said, the screen through which we view a thing. And I think that's an excellent and deeply disturbing point, Matt. Dockerby continues, finally, I'd like to mention the negative health aspects of sitting at a screen. Dockerby, we have talked about this on our own. Cough, cough, just hanging out.
How many hours has it been today? Okay.
Oh, buddy. All right. So Dockerby, this is an accountability moment for us. Dockerby points out, quote, we should all be moving at least 4 hours a day, and children should be moving even more than that. Sitting at a screen for long periods of time will have negative impacts on their physical and mental health. It can also do permanent damage to their eyes because of the blue screen unless they use a filter. Dockerby got us. Dockerby got us pretty good on that one.
I have a pair of those blue shift glasses.
I remember. They look really good on you too.
Oh yeah, they do.
Are those the ones that let you see ghosts?
I wore them to the first iHeart podcast awards that we ever got to go to. I think you guys were there, right? Yeah, we were all there, I think. Well, when Will Ferrell was on stage, I specifically remember we took photos and I had those dang things on, and I look at them now and I go, why was I doing that inside a theater?
Those are not the ghost goggles?
Ghost goggles are a different thing.
Okay, cool.
But we should all get some pairs. Anyway, Dockerby says, thanks again for all the information you share. It would be great if you haven't already, if you could do an episode on the history of public education. Many people do not know the origins or how horribly integration was handled after Brown versus Board of Education. Have a blessed day, Dockerby. So thank you, Dockerby. We paused along the way to explore some of this stuff, but I don't think our conspiracy realist here is speaking into a vacuum. It feels like we all largely agree with the points raised. I'm so glad that none of these seem like hot takes, you guys. We also, I imagine, we have our own wealth of personal experiences that apply to many of these points.
Oh, you guys, speaking of personalized experience, do you guys remember when we went to California and did those meta videos?
Into the metaverse.
How could I forget?
Well, we did one with, is it Carolina? Is that her?
Carolina Barlow.
Yes, Carolina Barlow. We did one with her. And I don't know if you guys remember when we were chatting with her before and after the shoot, she was telling us about a documentary road trip that she and Will Ferrell were shooting.
It looks amazing. Where it's his best friend and co-writer, collaborator who is trans, and them going on this road trip together, and it just being this incredible bonding experience where they just learned more about each other than they had in decades of knowing each other previously.
Yeah, it's called Will and Harper, and we're not sponsored by them. I just want to put this out there. It was crazy to see the trailer of it, and then to see some of the behind the scenes where Carolina's there and they're just shooting that stuff, and it just made me think of that time we had out there, and it was cool.
Nice. And this brings us to, because that feels like a letter from home for us, this brings us to one of our last things for this evening's program. We heard from Sam, and Sam just wrote us the nicest piece of correspondence. We'll read just a little bit of it. Hi, guys. I'm Sam. I'm a long-time Stuff They Don't Want You to Know listener. I absolutely love listening to each and every episode while on road trips, working from home as a nonprofit fundraiser, or taking my dog kids for walks around the neighborhood here in Asheville. I don't have any conspiracy news, but I've just wanted to say hi there to you all, and thank you so much for a long time now. You guys make me laugh and you make me think. I really enjoy what you all put out into the universe. And then, as bonus credit, Sam, you included some amazing pictures of your rescued doggos, Lucy and Beans, and told us that you do photo shoots with them every Halloween season. I might need an insulin shot. This was just so sweet. Does that land? Is that how insulin works?
I think it is.
So we want to, with that, thank you so much to Dockerby, to Anonymous, to Metagent or Metagent, and thank you to Sam, Lucy, and Beans. Thanks to everybody who reached out to us. Stay tuned for our future explorations. As always, we have such wonders to show you, and we can't do it without you, and we can't wait to hear from you.
That's right. Reach out and touch Faith, or, us, Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. You know who we are. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook, where you can join our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, and get in on the memery and conversations surrounding every single episode that we put out. We are also Conspiracy Stuff on X, FKA Twitter, as well as YouTube, where we have video content galore for you to consume. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
I finally caught up and saw the picture of Lucy and Beans. Finally. And it's amazing.
Epic.
Lucy rules. Beans is amazing too, but Lucy's just got this like snaggletooth thing going on. It's great. Okay, if you want to call us and use your phone in your mouth or your computer in your mouth, whatever, your mouth is probably going to be involved. Call 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, you've got 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and say whatever you'd like. Just please include whether or not we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than could fit in that voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. So join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.